A mobile phone camera captures Sami Yatim's last moments. He's at the front of the streetcar, alone. Police are outside. He has a 5-centimeter knife. Not all officers have drawn their weapons. A shouted warning, then gunshots. A few seconds later, more bullets, 9 in all. An officer uses an electronic stun gun on the fallen teenager at this point. Later, he's pronounced dead at a nearby hospital. Toronto's police chief has acknowledged the worries of a shocked city.
I am very aware that the public is very concerned about this tragic event. They have every right to be concerned.
But there's not just concern, also a growing anger. More than 1,000 people, including Sami Yatim's mother from Aleppo in Syria, have marched on the neighborhood where he was killed. A picture is slowly emerging of an occasionally troubled 18-year-old, but with no known history of violence. People are demanding answers.
I thought it could have been me. Now, when I see the police, it's scary. They scare me.
There could have been something else done. It didn't have to end that way.
At least 3 separate investigations have begun. The officer who fired the shots has been suspended. More protests are thought likely.
Flanked by their people's flags, Israeli and Palestinian negotiators say this time peace talks will mean something.
It's time for the Palestinians to live in peace, freedom, and dignity within their own independent sovereign state.
I believe that history is not made by cynics. It is made by realists who are not afraid to dream. And let us be these people.
Livni and Erekat seeming optimism was the result of nearly 6 months of flying, prodding, and listening by U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry.
The parties have agreed here today that all of the final status issues, all of the core issues, and all other issues are all on the table for negotiation.
The final status issues include what happens with Jerusalem, the final borders for an independent Palestine, the question of Palestinian refugees, and Israel's security concerns. Unlike 2010, U.S. officials say neither side is setting preconditions, and both are taking political risks to re-enter talks. The Palestinians are suspending their bid for UN Security Council recognition, while the Israelis will release more than 100 Palestinian prisoners as a show of good faith. What's more, both sides have promised the Americans they will not quit at the least provocation. As an incentive, the U.S. and its Quartet partners have created a $4 billion private investment package to bolster the Palestinian economy.
This is a man who still enjoys large support despite the recent unprecedented wave of protest against his rule. Supporters of Prime Minister Recep Tayyip Erdogan says he's perhaps the most successful leader since Mustafa Kemal Atatürk, the founder of modern Turkey. At this dinner in Istanbul, Erdogan called for unity.
No one can compete with what our government has done for this country. Being the majority doesn't mean we ignore the minority.
But the Prime Minister and his government's image have suffered. It all started when a few hundred environmentalists objected to a government plan to build a mall in Gezi Park in the center of Istanbul. But the demonstrators grew to tens of thousands of people protesting against other government policies. Police were accused of using excessive force. 6 people were killed, including a policeman, and thousands of people were wounded. Deniz Ahmed is a university student who says he was protesting against his prime minister.
I just saw my friends are they're just getting beaten by the police officers on the streets, and couldn't keep myself to join it, trying to oppress the people and just seeing them as the voting machines.
Harsh police reaction triggered more criticism of the government. But Ibrahim Adham says the anti-government protest will only increase the popularity of the ruling Justice and Development Party.
During the 60s and 70s, there were coups, and every time the army took over, Erdogan changed all that and ended foreign debt. He works for his country. After Gezi, he will get more votes.
Critics of the Prime Minister says he's becoming authoritarian by cracking down on opponents, the media and personal freedoms. But for Erdogan's supporters, he's leading Turkey to prosperity and success.
Every day around lunchtime in Tennessee's Appalachian Mountains, a yellow school bus winds its way down bumpy roads to some of the area's most isolated neighborhoods. Janet Morrow is the bus driver. For 6 hours a day, she delivers lunches to children who would otherwise go hungry because their parents can't afford to feed them.
A lot of them probably don't have gas money to come to where we're at in Irwin, to feed their kids.
Come on, guys. So the food bank Morrow works for comes to the kids. None of the parents would speak to Al Jazeera on camera or allow us to show their children's faces, but they want their story reported. They say despite working 2 and even 3 jobs, wages are so low in this region, many families rely on government assistance and food banks just to eat.
Some of the food we get from USDA.
Rhonda Chafin heads up the Second Harvest Food Bank that runs the school bus feeding program, known as the Lunch Express. She says it was created because teachers were worried student hunger was affecting learning.
Teachers came to us. They were calling us and saying, we've got children that we know that they go home with little or nothing in the home to eat at nights or on the weekends.
Teachers feared without a regular government school lunch program, students would have nothing in the summer recess.
Mayonnaise and ketchup.
So the Lunch Express started its first route. Now it's in its 2nd year and there are 4 buses. Heidi Davis is one of the program volunteers.
And I saw hunger in the classroom kind of firsthand. And that's actually why I got really interested in food insecurity in our community and wanted to do something like this.
Food banks here have trouble attracting donations. That's why of the 30,000 children in Northeast Tennessee who qualify for government lunch, this summer, the Lunch Express can only feed 600.
I know they need it, and it's important to them because their entire attention is on that meal, the time that they're on that bus. And that tells me that they really need that food.
Bye, everybody.
So Chafin is hopeful that next summer she'll have the donations to operate even more buses to feed the thousands of children that this summer remained hungry.
Private Bradley Manning, closely guarded, showing little emotion, walks out of a military courtroom after being found guilty of espionage, theft, and other charges. On the most serious offense of aiding the enemy, he was found not guilty, but he could still spend the rest of his life in a military prison, in outrage to the small group of supporters who rallied outside the Army base. The polls show the majority of Americans are likely to agree with the verdict. They believe he is a traitor and his leaks harmful to U.S. national security. Manning testified he wanted to start a conversation to make Americans aware this is what happens in war.
They dehumanized the individuals they were engaging and seemed to not value human life.
The graphic video shows the U.S. military opening fire and killing a dozen men in Iraq, among them journalists, their camera mistaken for a weapon. A van trying to evacuate the wounded fired on. There were children inside.
It's their fault for bringing their kids to a battle. That's right.
The release of the video didn't impact the helicopter crew. They were cleared of wrongdoing by the U.S. military. It didn't change Americans' already low opinions of the war.
You both hindered the individual relationships and you hinder the process of carrying on. Now, in the long run, people will talk to us because you can't not talk to the United States. We're too big. But you add a measure of reserve to that. So, yes, the damage is real.
Manning also supplied WikiLeaks with the details of the prisoners held at Guantanamo Bay, Cuba. Defense lawyer David Ream says it's made little difference.
This information just wasn't anything new. And even if it was new, it presented the detainees in a terrible light, didn't give our side of the story. So again, I come back to the thought that it was really the shock and embarrassment of the fact that they were leaked.
It remains the largest leak of classified material in U.S. history. The U.S. government acknowledges it continues to be an embarrassment, and that is something that Manning may pay for with his freedom.